Eu queria mostrar para vocês um pouco da transição, que também tem um paralelo com a nossa própria história da arquitetura aqui, que foi um movimento de resistência, né, aos valores que vieram mais diretamente da Europa. Eu vou estar falando especificamente sobre uns poucos projetos que representaram essa transição em Winnipeg, do século XIX, entre o neoclassicismo até uma ideia de modernidade, mesmo que essa ideia de modernidade tenha se referenciado de uma maneira diferente, no caso de Winnipeg, mas os paralelos vão ser evidentes também. Então, eu acho que também, sendo uma cultura nova, uma cultura muito mais nova, digamos assim, que a cultura de São Paulo, do Rio, da cultura urbana brasileira. Winnipeg tem praticamente 140 anos, então é uma cidade muito mais nova, mas se passou por processos semelhantes, ok? Então eu vou dar esse panorama e eu quero tentar fazer isso o mais rapidamente possível para a gente tentar entrar, então, mais na questão local que a gente decidiu oferecer para vocês, quase com um tom humorístico, de pôr para vocês que vocês pensem o inverno radical de Winnipeg junto com a gente. Então, essa primeira fala de Winnipeg, da arquitetura, do urbanismo de Winnipeg, para trazer vocês dentro desse contexto. A segunda parte das atividades hoje é exatamente para tentar estabelecer um diálogo, ok? Então, se vocês me permitirem, eu vou falar em inglês, acho que vai ser até um pouquinho mais rápido. Esse é um trabalho que foi feito em colaboração com um colega, Sirina Karvichvi, who is a teacher at the University of Winnipeg. We collaborate in many different projects, and we have an ongoing collaboration trying to bring the two universities in Winnipeg together, Manitoba and Winnipeg. Narratives of the generation and the regeneration in the city of Winnipeg starts from the idea that Winnipeg grew from a certain reaction from the conditions that were found there. It's a reaction that comes from trying to identify the people, the first peoples of Winnipeg, with the radical conditions of Winnipeg. The radical conditions almost forced, historically, to a utopian approach to urbanism and architecture in the city. Right? The radical condition is the extreme isolation. No? Winnipeg, it is located in the center, in the geographic center of North America, and of course has an extremely harsh winter. In cities of 700,000 and more, Winnipeg is the coldest in the planet. Okay, so we live in the coldest city in the planet, right? So now this is just a book that was recently published a few years ago, reestablishing the notion of the city beautiful. The city beautiful was a movement in the beginning of 28th century that attempted to react to those harsh conditions, both economic, environmental conditions of Winnipeg. And I think the idea still thrives today. True architecture, and architecture then becomes a mode of not only reaction, but a mode of a way to reestablish a local identity, the local culture, in this way, through architecture. A very crucial moment in the history of Winnipeg, the period between 1874 and 1914, it was a radical transformation. It's when Winnipeg, in this period, had the biggest and the fastest evolution. At the time, within the Canadian context, Winnipeg was expected to become a Chicago, or the Chicago of the North. So you can see from, where's my pointer? You can see from almost a second generation of settlers, which is more like based on the farming culture, right? We can see here is a transition between a more farming settlement into urban settlement to a radical urbanization of the city. So this narrative, the Winnipeg degeneration and conversely regeneration, starts exactly from this utopian and dystopian impulses that drove the urban renewal, right? The second urban renewal, which is the reaffirmation or the affirmation of modernity, occurred in the 60s. But the first one, the first attempt to modernize the city, was actually in the turn of the century. The question is there today... Is there a third one today, right? This third one today is probably what Professor Neil Minook will address in his visit, is that there is a new renewal of architecture in Winnipeg today. And sometime tomorrow, I bring some of the projects that are helping to make this third wave of modernity in Winnipeg. In the past 10 years, there has been a series of new offices in town that are bringing architecture back into a critical discussion. The expansion of the cities within North America or in the Canadian context, right? Of course, sponsored by the capital, created in the fast growth and the fast transformation, created a social condition that could be called a vice or could generate or provoke what we call amoral behavior. So the City Beautiful movement came as a reaction to that supposedly negative urban behavior that came with urban renewal. It's often referred as euthentics, or as a method of behavior changes, as a theory from the 19th century that proposed that urban renewal has a mode of healing the population, has a strength of transforming socially the urban conditions of a place. So this is the Grand Master Plan for Winnipeg, part of the original City Beautiful movement. And most of it, in terms of the urban tissue or the urban grid, was realized. And the big mall here, as you see, was partially realized. Here is the legislature or the parliament, provincial parliament, and there is a mall. There is a grand boulevard where it was expected to have government buildings pretty much like in the similar strategy as the Eixo Monumental in Brasília. But of course, more Haussmannian kind of influence. So the Grand Master Plan for Winnipeg, and Winnipeg in 1912 was in the height or in the climax of economic renewal. There was a lot of money coming to Winnipeg by virtue of its geographic location. Being the center of North America, Winnipeg economy was strong because it was the main transportation hub in the North American. So all produced from west to east, all produced from south, west, north to Europe would go through Winnipeg. So the new palatial City Hall on Memorial, there was the first version for the City Hall, which became a Victorian building. That's the first proposal for the City Hall. In the original, what was called Mall of Triumph, with the legislature in the back. Yeah. the river was important because the river was the, let's say, the trigger for a Winnipeg settlement, right? In the let's say, in the original settlement of Winnipeg, Winnipeg was initiated exactly because of the encounter of the Red River that comes all the way from the south, which is the continuation of the Mississippi River in the United States, and the Assiniboine River in Canada is in the juncture of those two rivers that Winnipeg was founded, right? So the vocation of Winnipeg as a transportation hub started from the original settlement, right? At the time, the rivers were a very important mode of transportation, even though that... Sorry? Then, when urbanization came, the railway kind of replaced the river as a better mode of infrastructure for transportation, right? So there is also a relationship. I don't have any drawings or maps. There's also a relationship between the railway and the river in Winnipeg. It's very interesting. When I first arrived in Winnipeg, because it's extremely plain, right? It's totally flat. I always had the impression that the beach was there somewhere. That was going to encounter the beach, which of course you never do. But unconsciously, the beach is always present because the original geomorphological formation of Winnipeg was an ocean, Agassiz Ocean. So Winnipeg actually settled in the bottom of an ocean originally. So the beach is everywhere in Winnipeg, in a way. What happened is there's a very interesting condition, even though it's a mid-sized city, it's Winnipeg 750,000 in population. Somehow the network of rivers and the network of railways, they interlace in the middle of the city. So we have a very close connection with the train all the time, right? One of my favorite things that sometimes happen to me when I'm driving to school, for example, I have to stop like on a traffic light to have a train passing. And sometimes it's a 150 wagon train. It's a long train, and I find that fantastic because I can arrive at studio and say, sorry guys, I was caught by the train. I'm late. Oh, yeah? Sorry? Pardon? Yeah, trains, but there's a fairly good boundary between the railway and the other transportation networks. They are not so intimate, connected as Winnipeg. So the rivers are very present to everyday life, like in a very direct way, the same as the railway, and the same, of course, the roads. So by the turn of the century, certain examples of architecture being influenced by, of course, European architecture were started to take its presence in the city. This Fort Garry Hotel. This is the Union Station by Warren and Wetmore, which are the same architects that designed the Grand Central Station in New York City. So we have like the same way that we have a little opera in the Municipal Theater in Rio and São Paulo as inspiration from l'Opéra in Paris. We have a little Grand Central in Winnipeg, which was inspired by the Grand Central in New York City by the same architects. And this is Max Nordau, is the guy who developed this concept of the degeneration, the sick city, that's the conflict between the social condition of the city and the fast development created a form of degeneration. Of course, it's very disputable if the theory actually can be justified, but basically the guys say that people's behaviors are radically changed because of urban development. And of course, the reference of Chicago, which was our most direct, let's say, bigger city as neighbors. Chicago is 14 hours by car from Winnipeg, but was a main reference. And so much so that Winnipeg was called Chicago of the North. And of course, Paris and Haussmann as direct influences on the new trace of... So the generation theory by Max Nordau served almost as a counterpoint to what has to be developed after that, right? The working class can be considered as a dangerous class. Fear of slums. There were slums in the turn of century in Winnipeg, which, of course, brought contagion and disease. Poverty reflected both a moral and physical decline in individuals, bad behavior, physical stigmata, mental conditions being kind of blamed on the urban conditions of Winnipeg. And, of course, to counterpoint that is the notion of the white city Chicago, and the idea of the international exhibitions and the super development of Chicago as a way to heal the condition of urban degeneration. So these are some examples of Paris, right, which, of course, 100 years before was going through a similar kind of stigma in terms of fast-growing urban development. And the cabaret culture also, and the culture in general, was showed as almost like a sympathizer, a reaction to the same conditions, right? Specifically to Winnipeg, the Freemasons took the leadership, let's say, of the reorienting of Winnipeg urbanism and construction. From the 1900s, the idea of the City Beautiful movement was taking on seriously until 1914, the period of fast evolution, urban evolution of Winnipeg. So the 1914 represented the decline of Winnipeg and a sense of loss and the loss of potential, especially because of the creation of the Panama Canal. With the opening of the Panama Canal at the same time, the concentration of capital diverged to the south. So the trains or the you didn't need to go through the continent in order to distribute the goods to go through Europe, but all the goods would go then through the Panama Canal, and there was a great economic decline in Winnipeg because of that. As a result, there was a kind of, let's say, in terms of a cultural process or even an economic reestablishment of economic sustainability and equilibrium in Winnipeg. It took from the 20s after the post-war, right? Winnipeg was in this kind of hiatus, a gap in which things were to be redefined. And architecture then, after the post-war, represented finally the maturity of modernity in Winnipeg. And I'm just going to go and run through a few projects so you can just have a sense of the parallels that we can actually find between modernity in Brazil and also modernity in Winnipeg through architecture. And of course, those projects represent the affirmation that the city was no longer in decay, but it was a mature and well-developed kind of urban condition. So the condition of Winnipeg being at the center, the geographic center of North America, the center of Canada, in between west and east. Winnipeg is right at the center as well, and it's very close. It's just an hour away from the American border. So the situation of Winnipeg is quite interesting in terms of its geography, right? And it's at the very beginning of the prairies, right? Das planícies canadenses, which means that it was probably one of the first stops after what we call the Canadian Shields, which is a rugged, more rough kind of topography before hitting the plains. And the plains extend all the way to central Canada until we reach the Rockies on the other side. And of course, Winnipeg is the capital city of Manitoba. So in the 60s, downtown Winnipeg, we still had real favelas, real slums. So not much different from a certain aspect of the historical urban evolution of Brazil. And things were very, initially, in the turn of the century, they were very chaotic in terms of an idea for urban vision for the city, right? Pretty much those things, those evolutions happened in a very kind of spontaneous, organic way, and not in an organized way. For example, the first city hall, it was a Victorian building, which today was demolished to give place to a new idea for the city hall, the prefeitura, which happened through a competition. And there are some examples here from different, mostly Canadian architects. They want to exactly react against, let's say, architecture that could be considered retrograde in terms of urban evolution. This is the winning project by Russell, which was not built because the site of the project was changed, and this is the actual City Hall in Winnipeg from the 60s. Liebling Mel Michener, with the public safety building. This is the police headquarters in Winnipeg. And you can see at the 60s, actually, the use of concrete, and most of the application in Winnipeg is prefab concrete. Was pretty much in vogue. However, the main material source in terms of local material culture is the Tyndall stone, which is a species of soft granite that's found locally. It's the only place you can find that rock is in Manitoba. It was vastly used in the architecture, civic public architecture throughout the city. And then here we can see this is the City Hall. But the City Hall triggered the development of a whole new zone in the downtown, exactly the zone where the favelas were, to bring development to the neighborhood, which is slightly north of downtown. And then along the same time, there were the construction of theaters, museums. This is the main theater concert hall in Winnipeg, the Centennial Hall. This is the Museum of Man and Nature, and this is the City Hall here. And the idea was to bring urban development to the north of the city. The Red River is just passing a little bit north of that, or south of that, sorry. The Centennial Concert Hall. It's Blankstein's Manitoba Theatre Center. Etienne Gabory, Saint Boniface Civic Plaza, which is also an administrative building. In Saint Boniface, which was a city together with Winnipeg, and now everything is part of the same jurisdiction. And one last, I think is the last project that I'm going to show to you, which became the cover of Progressive Architecture at the time. In the 70s, Progressive Architecture was on one of the main North American architecture magazines that recognized the main building of University of Winnipeg as being the most advanced architecture in North America. And there was an attempt to University of Winnipeg is a downtown university, and the idea or the policy for the University of Winnipeg was to use architecture not only to expand the campus, but also to influence the redefinition of downtown Winnipeg. And that was done through a series of buildings that was highly inspired by an idea of modernity, which is the idea of finally, let's clean the city, as if the city was ever dirty or sick, right? So Duckworth, one of the rectors of the university, and they say the city is our campus. And to this day, the University of Winnipeg has this mandate to renew, to contribute to the renovation. Professor Minuk probably will talk about this building when he comes, which is also a building, a more recent building from the University of Winnipeg. So just to show the tradition stands until today. Other examples, for example, the transformation of shopping malls also was affected by this new condition of modernity. This is the School of Architecture, which is the Russell Building, which is, of course, was highly influenced by the Chicago style, or indirectly influenced by Mies van der Rohe. No, this is University of Manitoba is a suburban university. So this is out in the outskirts. You can see that practically the University of Manitoba was originally an agricultural university, right? Because that was the first economy, one of the first economies in Winnipeg was agriculture. So you can see that the university was placed in the outskirts of the city because of the connection with the agricultural fields. And that's why you see the School of Architecture is basically on a plain, and pretty much at this time there was nothing else there. This late 50s, I would say. And John Russell, the idealist for the school, our school is the second oldest school of architecture in Canada. There are only 12 schools of architecture in the whole entire country. And the oldest school is McGill in Montreal. So John Russell, the best architecture today is characterized by clarity and order in its design, by sound structure expression, by simplicity of inner space, the fundamental architectural commodity, by dignity of proportion, and by a unity of the whole. It no longer has to struggle to free itself from the curious academicism of the early years of our century, when much of the art on this continent was suffering from an eclectic hangover induced by too many stylistic revivals in the 19th century. So John Russell was one of the local visionaries to bring an idea of modernity that created a very clear rupture with the previous influences. This is the old airport, was just recently demolished, which was a big mistake. It was a beautiful building, Norquay building. That's the courtyard of the School of Architecture, the Russell building. those are other examples. Those are not in Winnipeg, right? This is the Salt Institute by Louis Kahn and other references. Scarborough College in Ontario by Andrews. And then Gaboury again. Other influences, Le Corbusier. Etienne Gaboury is probably our most kind of recognized French architect in Winnipeg. Winnipeg is the second biggest French city in Canada, outside Quebec. And Manitoba is the only bilingual province. Is that right? I think officially it's not the only one. There's other ones, but there are not many. Officially, I know Manitoba is. Canada is, but provincially, like, I think Manitoba provincially is, along with Quebec, is because all the other ones are, except Quebec, are Anglo. Like, there's no, you go to an office in Vancouver, they don't have the papers in French, you know? Something like that. Sorry? Sorry? Yeah. That's the Winnipeg expansion of the 60s. The main building of the university, you can see. If we think about Russell's comment, this is downtown Winnipeg, that's Portage Avenue. This is the highway that cuts Canada from east to west, right, and cuts the city right in the middle. The University of Winnipeg has occupied a significant area in the downtown. This is the old, just to remember the quote by Russell, this is the old city hall that was demolished to give place then to kind of a new manifestation of modernity. It's the Centennial Hall, which of course was pretty much inspired by Centre Georges Pompidou, the Beaubourg, in Paris. And other buildings too. I'm repeating those slides. That helped that revitalization of. Sorry, I'm repeating some here. Okay. So, just to give you a taste, this is not to contrive, let's say, a discussion, but actually it's to just help to give you a little bit of the context and show a little bit of the parallels that happen in terms of urban evolution and how architecture then represents, has an important role in relationship to the construction of urban spaces and public spaces. Okay?
My name is Elena. I come from Winnipeg, like all of us in Canada, close to here. This is from 1920, about. So, but if you could see this today, my apartment would be just around there. So I'm not going to talk about the river at all, but most of our landscapes look a lot like this. You can see the horizon everywhere. And so my winter story is about a tradition that my family does every year, around Christmas, and we drive out into a vast landscape. The roads look a lot like this, and we drive out and go Christmas tree hunting, and we chop down a Christmas tree and take it home. But last year that we went, we drove out in 2 cars because my family is expanding now. And one of our cars, the car that I was in, broke down because it was too cold. So we stopped, and the car in front of us, we're in the middle of nowhere. All you can see is white everywhere. And we got stuck, and our car broke down, and the other car kept going, and we had no cell phones. And so we just had to wait, and it was about minus 45. It was the coldest day of the year. And so we got out, and we were just in our parkas. I think Emily has a picture of that later. And we just had to wait. But our streets, you can see so far in Manitoba that we just had to watch every car come by, just hoping it was someone that knew us or would help us. So we had to watch for a long time, and after a long time, my family turned around and found us and came and got us. And then we got a Christmas tree. We left our car there. 8 of us in a very small car with our dog. We went into the forest and chopped down a Christmas tree, still very cold. We got into our other car, and I don't even remember what happened then, but for some reason this car stopped working. So then we had to hitchhike. Do you guys hitchhike? Yeah? So 8 people with a dog and a Christmas tree now had to hitchhike in minus 40 weather. So we all sat in the back of a pickup truck. And it's just very funny to imagine. It was very, very, very cold. And that's my story. And then we left both cars there.
Okay, so I'm Brendan. I'm from Winnipeg too. Okay, so this on the left is it's a Toboggan Hill that was made because everything's so flat, so we have to build our own hills to slide down in the winter. So there's ice on there, and you slide down on a sled, and you come down the bottom, and you go as far as you can. And I remember just when I was little going up and down and up. This one. Up and down, up, down, up and down, and just trying to go the fastest and try going backwards and forwards in all different ways. So yeah, that's my story.
Hi, I'm Brooke. I'm from rural Manitoba, so it's a little bit different landscape than Winnipeg. This is my family Christmas tree hunting. Actually, I didn't know that about the picture, but my sister is up in the tree. I forgot. You can see she's holding the saw. I wanted to talk about how in rural Manitoba, the landscape is it's a working landscape, like it's all for the grain and the livestock. But when the winter comes and the grain's off and the livestock is all either in the barns or they found the hollows in the hills to stay warm, I guess. And the rest of it's basically open for entertainment at that point. So I don't know. Did you put them up there? Yeah, they're all there. So I wanted to talk about, I have a valley. Do I press left or right? That's my horse. I'm carrying the Christmas tree because my brother's horse knocked him off. And this is usually how we drag him when it starts getting long. But you can see how we have hills where I'm from. So we don't build our own toboggan. We actually walk up and down a real hill like you guys have. What's the name of Snipper. And that's Bailey behind him. and that's cash. This is a shack that we build in the bottom of the valley in the winter because we can. It's made out of straw, so it's really thick walls, and it gets so hot in there you jump around in this outfit if you wanted. And we would, I'm standing on a quarter of the way up the hill probably, so we push down the snow with the tractor so it's a flat, and it makes you go faster. And then we have our friend here with the snowmobile that you can see. He pulls us back up so we don't have to walk up because we're lazy. And then when you get tired, we go and sit by the fire. You can see the smoke in the back. Or if you get cold, then you go inside the shack where everybody is drinking. We drink a lot because we have nothing else to do in the country. We farm and drink. But you can see the straw, and we put some steel pipes around the top so we can put straw on top as well because it keeps the heat in. And
also, like about the drinking, you said that alcohol makes you warm.
no, alcohol makes you feel warmer. It's a fact. I've tested. I've tested. No. You feel better. Okay. I also wanted to say how this is the only picture I had on my phone, but it's a sleigh, if you can tell, and it's pulled by the team. That's Panther and Saber. And we use it for fun. We go on rides down. We go into the hills because it's warmer, I guess. And that's where the animals keep for the winter, mostly, because they can stay warm from the wind, probably. But then we also, on the sleigh, will pile the straw that you've seen from the shack. And we pile it like 3 high, and then the workhorses will actually pull it down into the valley, and we stand on the back and we push them off slice after slice, and then the animals come out of the bush and eat it. So, something else, I don't know, it's fun, but it's also the work, and I just thought that was a rural thing that I could talk about.
Hi, I'm Emily. This is actually not a picture of anyone I know, but it's from a movie. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's called A Christmas Story. So this is this it the brother or the main character? Either. I thought that the way that people dress in the winter was important, and the fact that when you're a little kid, you don't really dress yourself. So not as a mother, but as mothers do, they overreact, and, well, sometimes necessary, the way they dress their kids. So, as you can imagine, this kid has so many layers on, and as a kid, you put on long johns. Do you guys know what that is? Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, so you put those on, and then pants on, and then sweatpants, and then snow pants, which are just like really thick insulated pants like a jacket would be. Sometimes they come in one piece, which are really cool. and then like layers and layers of socks and boots and mitts and the scarf around your head. Like, yeah, I just thought that this was an important feature of winter, even though maybe adults don't dress like this necessarily, but as a child, you maybe should, but as a child, as you don't really have a choice, your mother does this, and as she's dressing you, you're just getting hotter and hotter sitting in your house, and by the time you get outside, you actually want to take most of it off. But then as you play outside more, sometimes it does stay on, sometimes it does come off, and yeah.
But all the buses are very warm, so when
Oh,
you're
yeah.
on the bus, then sometimes people faint because they're so hot.
Yeah. It's very hard to go in and outside, especially when you're wearing things like this. Yeah, like on the bus, they heat the buses, so you're waiting at the bus stop freezing, and then you get on and you're like, okay, this is way too much. And your people are standing next to you, and same with cars and whatever else. Yeah.
Sorry, this is an image from the internet, and I wasn't sure, but it's not very good. Anyways, I guess as a child, I was lucky that I had, my grandpa lives on the lake, and in the summer it's the lake, but in the winter it has to freeze in order for everyone to make their own rinks on the lake. And our neighborhood would, in the winter we would go out and have to clear the snow off the ice first, but you'd have to wait until the ice, your parents just intuitively know when the ice was hard enough. But we would have to take shovels, which I'm sure you've all seen a snow shovel. I don't know. And we'd have to push the snow off manually by ourselves, which there's also many different types of snow. There's the light, fluffy snow that is kind of easier. But then the really thick, wet snow, it gets really heavy. And by the time you clear off the rink, it just gets exhausting that you almost don't want to even skate on it, but you do. And also, there's different textures of ice. The arena type of ice that they make for you is just much better to skate on, whereas lake ice is quite bumpy, and there's a thin layer of snow. But my dad actually created a little mini Zamboni device, which is like a broom with a carpet on it. Oh, do you know a Zamboni? Oh, in hockey? Yeah, it's like a car that's a giant rectangle, and it basically spits water on the ice, and you drive it around the rink to water the ice, I guess, and it keeps it, it cleans it, basically. Every period, they will clean the ice with the Zamboni, and so the water comes out, and then this is dragged and smooths the water out. And you have to wait about probably 5 minutes after he's done with the Zamboni. And so that the little thin layer of water he lays down dries. But what my dad made was kind of a mini version of this, where it was more of a broom with a piece of rectangular carpet on it. And he would put a hose that would connect at the bottom. And he would just drag the hose up and down the ice every time we did that. We actually even had our own, in our backyard, a lot of people kind of build their own rinks sometimes. There's a lot of weird different inventions people, I think, make for their own backyard rinks. So, and it's kind of fun to have all your neighborhood friends play a game of hockey, or just come have hot chocolate and have a fire pit and kind of, I don't know, that's just been my tradition. I haven't really built any hay huts or anything, but I'm sure that would have been a great addition to the rink. But I would say that's maybe something you have never been exposed to, and just, I guess, the freezing ground, and that's basically my story, I guess. Even when you're skating on it, you can clear the ice off, but there's still a little bit of snow on this type of ice. That's why you kind of have to create the Zamboni, I guess, to make it really shiny the way.
It's hot water, so it melts the ice and snow, and it makes it completely smooth. So
Yeah.
you have a pucker your blade, you don't catch any surfaces.
Yeah. Although on lake ice, you can still go flying because it's really uneven. So if you go to stop fast, you may just tip right over, because there's a big chunk of ice there that you didn't see. And also maybe a good thing to mention is maybe you've seen in movies where people fall through ice. You can kind of detect that with your skates sometimes. If it's not quite frozen yet, you can hear the ice kind of cracking under you in the lake. And that's when you kind of know you shouldn't go further into the lake. You should just stay towards the edges, because the edges freeze quicker than the inside of the lake. So, yeah, that's basically my story. Yeah. Oh.
Hi, my name is Mateo. I'm going to talk about how much I hate ice and how much I hate driving on ice. Before I get to the driving story, there's another story just about walking on ice. So when you're walking around in the winter, if you have any water on the sidewalk and then snow gets over it, you don't see it. It's just covered up. But the snow will usually be very soft and fluffy. So as soon as you walk on it, you don't see it, you'll just fall over. So when I go to catch my bus in the morning to get to school, sometimes I have to run. And it's really scary because one time, like last year, I was running to catch my bus and there was a little part on the sidewalk where it kind of sloped up on the side. So I stepped on that and I kind of slid sideways and I had my laptop bag, like my computer and all my stuff. So I fell on top of that and I cracked the screen and now it's still cracked and I never got it fixed. So that kind of sucks. But that happens kind of every day. And then going on long road trips. So my grandpa lives in a town called Flin Flon, which is in Manitoba, but it's like 8 hours north. So you drive along this like super long road and there's pretty much nothing for 8 hours. So one story, we were driving back with my grandma and my dad and my mom and my brother. I was like, I think maybe 8 years old or something. It was at nighttime, so it was really dark. And the thing you have to watch out for is black ice. So you have like a very thin layer of ice on the road, but you can't really see it because there's just black like asphalt underneath. So it just looks like a normal road, but it's like really dangerous. You see cars that end up in the ditch on the side all the time. So I guess my dad was driving. I was sleeping in the back, and then all of a sudden the whole car is just spinning. So I guess he turned one way, and then it started to slide, and then he tried to make up for it by turning the other way very quickly, and the car just kind of started spinning. So we made like, I think, 3 spins all across the road into the other lane, but thankfully nobody hit us. So we spun like all the way and then ended up in the ditch facing this way on the other side of the road. And that's just like a hazard you kind of have to watch out for all the time when driving in the winter. So that's my story. And I don't like driving or walking in the winter. It kind of sucks. So.
My name's Nick. This is my story. This is sorry. I hate using this. Sorry. As a kid, I grew up with a pretty big yard, like backyard around my house, probably the size of 2 soccer fields or football fields, whatever you say. And as a kid, it'd fill up with snow, so probably 1.5 meters to 2 meters high, like the depth of the snow around my yard. And me, my dad, and my brother, as kids, would go around with a snow blower, which nobody, I assume, knows what it is. It's a little machine, kind of like a lawnmower, but it moves snow with a blade, a spinning blade, shoots it out a chute here. There it is, yeah. So this is a snowblower, and you push it, snow goes in via a rotating blade, and then it shoots out a distance away. And we'd use the entire field, about 200 feet, 60 meters or so of it, and go in a giant circle, slowly from the middle going out. And we'd create a mound. Sure, yeah. So this would be the plan of the yard. House is here, driveway. And all this 2 meters tall of snow. And we'd start about here and just make rotations going out. And with this snowblower, it would make a giant pile in the middle here, a big mountain, essentially. And we'd let that sit for a day. And afterwards, we'd take the hose and water it. We'd cover the entire mountain in water and let it harden for the night. And the next morning, we'd go in with a saw, and we'd dig out our own tunnels, me and my brother, and we'd create a structure or some kind of, I don't know what to say. fortress, big fortress, essentially. And we'd build holes like this by hand with shovel or a saw. And, sorry? What's that mean? Never. Oh, sorry. I never knew the name of it. Yeah. Yeah. So we'd build these holes that we'd crawl through, live in, play games, stuff like that. Often there'd be structural collapses. My brother was wider, a bit bigger. He'd get stuck, or the walls would cave in, and we'd have to shovel him out, rescue him. And we also built the other type. It's called an igloo, and I think Eduardo will show you what it is. And that's my story.
Any comments, any questions about the igloo? Of course, that tradition is basically dying because the Inuit, we don't call them Eskimos anymore. It's inappropriate for some reason. The Inuit, they were originally a nomad culture, but during 28th century, that culture has been kind of a dwindling. And what happened is the Inuit have become settled in communities. Then what happened is they don't have their natural capacity for survival because they are gatherers and hunters and nomads. By localizing themselves in fixed sites now, creates lots of problems. One of the problems is architectural problems. Because I would say that those communities, isolated communities, it would be probably the closest equivalent to our favelas in Brazil. And because there's a kind of a collusion between their original culture and their present contemporary condition, there's all kinds of really chronic problems. I would say that the fact that the Inuits left the nomad culture, therefore there are not many igloos being built in Canada these days. It's one of probably the biggest social problem we have in Canada at the moment. Okay. Just changing a little bit now, I would like to present to you, continue with the question, the discussion of winter, the two different contexts in which we are going to invite you guys to engage with us to come up with some propositions for how we could engage a frozen surface, right? The image you see is in Winnipeg. It's the Assiniboine River, which is, of course, is joined by the Red River. And the Assiniboine River has the longest skating trail in the world, skiing. The trail is 5.5 kilometers, and goes almost, doesn't really arrive at the edge of the city, but goes quite a long way. And that surface is treated by the city and by the Forks Corporation, where it's called the Forks. It's a park where the two rivers meet. And a few years ago, there was the proposal of engaging the trail with a series of pavilions, which are naming the warming huts. Because if you skate for 5.5 kilometers, 6 kilometers, it's quite a long way. Sometimes you have to sit down and rest, and then if you have to sit down and rest and the place is slightly warmer than the natural space, even the better. So this was a competition was created a few years ago to propose warming huts, which I guess the translation would be cabanas quentes, or cabanas para se esquentar, digamos assim. That's the first thing. The second context is I would say a brand new tradition in the city. Is the result of one individual, Joe Kalternak, which is an architect graduated from our program. And he had this crazy idea of, this was like probably 4 years ago was the first one, to make a pop-up restaurant on the surface of the river in the middle of the winter and open up the restaurant for the public. It was a huge success. It's actually one of the most fun things that happen in the middle of the winter. It's very difficult to get a ticket to go, but it's those two contexts that we are going to present to you. So